Evening, everyone. We're going to start with a proclamation. Stairs. Whereas National Accessibility Week is a week for Canadians to promote inclusion and accessibility in our communities and workplaces, to celebrate our progress, and to be inspired to further break down accessibility barriers. And whereas an estimated 15% of Ontario's approximately 11 million residents have some form of disability, and as a disability increases with age, there is a need for greater awareness of the needs, capabilities, and potential of persons with disabilities in Ontario. I'm out of shape. Whereas individuals with disabilities are impacted daily by barriers to information, facilities, employment, transportation, and communication supports, therefore negatively challenging an individual's ability to fully participate in community life. And whereas accessibility and inclusion are essential for ensuring that all community members have equity and opportunities and the ability to fully participate in community life. And whereas the City of Woodstock Council and the citizens of Woodstock are committed to working to make Woodstock an inclusive community in which all persons can independently exercise their civil, political, social, and cultural rights on an equal basis, ensuring that everyone has the right to live in conditions of dignity, respect, and peace. And whereas, on behalf of the City of Woodstock, we extend our recognition to all persons with disabilities and offer our support to National Accessibility Week as an opportunity to celebrate accessibility as a national concern, while working locally to increase our efforts to achieve our goal of becoming an inclusive community by working to eliminate barriers to City of Woodstock facilities, programs, and services. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Jerry Accioni, on behalf of Council, encourage everyone to support equality of access and opportunity for persons with disabilities, and do hereby proclaim May 28th to June 3rd as National Accessibility Week in the City of Woodstock, dated this 18th day of May, 2023 in Woodstock, Ontario. Thank you. This hybrid meeting is being held in person here in council chambers and electronically in accordance with section 238, subsection 3.3 of the Municipal Act and section 16.6.24 of the City of Woodstock Procedure Bylaw. This meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube channel, and a recording will be posted on the city's website following the meeting. The meeting will also be broadcast on Rogers TV. An agenda of the meeting can be found on the agendas, meetings, and minutes page of the city's website. And tonight, Councillor Wheaton will be reading the resolutions. Councillor Wheaton? Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on one second. There was no closed sessions tonight. Any disclosure or conflict of interest? Councillor Wismer Van Meer?
I will be submitting a conflict of interest for item 14.B.1, street naming for Woodstock Meadows subdivision.
You must state the general nature thereof.
Of course. One of the suggested namings is Wismer Road, which of course is my family name. So I'm going to declare the conflict of interest for that reason.
Okay, thank you. Any other disclosure of conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none. No disclosure of new business that I'm aware of. No matters arising from the minutes. And now, Councillor Wheaton, the minutes.
Thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Leatherborough that the minutes of the regular meeting of Woodstock City Council held on May 4th, 2023 be adopted.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. Thank you. Additions to the agenda. Councillor Wheaton.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Lauder that the following items be added to the agenda. Correspondence items 10.A, Ganga Toteram, Ambicare for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion event request to place yard signs. Bylaw 9600-23, a bylaw to amend the City of Woodstock's Municipal Code, Chapter 153, Property Standards Officers Appointments. Bylaw 9601-23, a bylaw to amend City of Woodstock Municipal Code, Chapter 134, Officials Appointments. Bylaw 9602-23, a bylaw to amend the City of Woodstock Municipal Code, Chapter 127, Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns with any of those? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. Now, presentations. Our first delegation tonight is Ms. Scrimger. Scrimger and Company for the 2022 draft financial statements, and I believe she is online. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just getting the screen sharing capability here. You see that?
No, we cannot.
Okay. Sorry that I'm getting, when I try to share my screen, they're saying I'm not able to, so I'm just confirming. I think I need permission from you at your end. There we go.
Yep. Okay, there we go. Yep.
Thank you. All right, there we go. So these are the audited draft financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2022. We conducted the audit over the last month and a half with your staffing. And at this point, I'm just going to thank them for all their help, in particular, your treasurer, Diane Campbell, who does an amazing job of getting this ready for us in a very tight frame. So I will go through page by page. Please don't hesitate to ask me any questions as I do that. The first, I'm going to our independent auditors report. So this is what we call a clean auditor's opinion. We sent a materiality for each of our audits. This year, the city's materiality was $1 million based on your revenue streams. However, that doesn't mean we only look at items over $1 million. Every transaction that flows through the city, whether it be on the revenue side, payroll, or purchases, is eligible for our statistical sampling within each of those cycles. And we have conducted our audit on those and do not find anything materially incorrect in those processes. They are dated as of today's date under Canadian auditing standards. Those charged with governance, which would be this council, must approve the financial statements. And then at that point, we can finalize them once they are approved. And I know the FIR is going to be submitted once we get this all through. So that will be the next step. I'll go through this at a fairly high level, but if there's any specific questions, I'm willing to answer anything that council might want to know. So when I go through financial statements, the first line I usually look at is this net financial assets line. This would be the amount of money that the city would have in the bank at the end of the year if everybody paid you what they owed you and you paid all of your liabilities off. And so you can see, I always like to see this at least staying the same or increasing. And you can see that there's been about a $2 million increase this year from last year in that line. So that's one of my financial indicators that I look at. The next one I look at is under non-financial assets. So this tangible capital assets and capital work in progress. These are the assets that you need to have in place in order to provide the services that you provide. And each year, the city books something called amortization, which is basically the using up of those assets. And so in 2022, the amortization for the year was approximately $10 million. It's not something you budget. When you budget, you're budgeting for the purchase of those assets at the time that they're purchased. But under PSAB, which is what these financial statements are presented under, the financial framework, they are capitalized and then amortized over their useful life. And you can see if you add those two lines for 2022 and then compare them to 2021, there is about a $10 million increase there. And that's in excess of the $10 million of amortization that we booked this year. So in fact, you've reinvested in assets of $20 million approximately. And that we want to see you replacing assets at least equal to the amortization, because that's based on historical cost. And you obviously are doing that and doing that in significant fashion. I then also look at the net long-term liabilities up above here, where that's the debt that you've incurred in the year. And you did incur debt this year, but you also paid off debt. And in fact, our overall debt position has decreased by almost $500,000. So all good financial indicators as I'm going through the balance sheet. Coming down an accumulated surplus at the end of the year of 297 million, almost 300 million. And as you can see, the majority of that is reinvested in capital, as I mentioned. And then the remainder we'll get to when we get to a note to the financial statements, but typically is in your reserves and reserve funds. The next statement is your consolidated statement of operations and accumulated surplus, showing the budget for 2022 that was passed by council compared to the actual for 2022 and then the actual for 2021. Under revenues, the budgeted amount was 80 million. Your actual was 86. Couple reasons for that. One was just, if you remember, 2021 was still very much dictated by COVID and COVID restrictions. We returned to somewhat of a normal year in 2022, although there were still restrictions at the beginning of 2022. And so we're seeing some increases in things like user charges. The budget was done on a conservative basis. And again, what actually happened was far better because those restrictions were starting to lift. Investment income, as all of you are aware, the interest rates have gone up, and this is investment income not only on your general revenues, but also on what's called your reserve funds, those savings that you have for future use. And then under the other, there are some land sales, so it's always difficult to budget for that in any given year. And there was about $600,000 more land sales than there were in 2021. That were budgeted, sorry. So those are the reasons for the increases there. Under expenditures, so I'll remind council that we do not budget for amortization, as I mentioned on the previous page. And if you add that $10 million that I've talked about a couple of times of amortization to the budget of 70 million, we're very close to that 81 million. And really the other area, as you can see, is under recreation, which, as you're aware, as COVID restrictions were lifted, those activities were allowed to get back to normal, somewhat normal, and the expenditures there would be over budget, but not over budget, but over what we budgeted and over last year. And that's really because of the amortization on those assets, as well as the activities returning to somewhat normal. The other underneath the revenues there are all related to capital. And so we take them out of your operations in order to show exactly what the operations results were. And you can see last year, this 1,029,000 that was last year, that's really your operating surplus after amortization. And you can see again, a significant increase this year. So again, another good financial indicator. Coming down to that accumulated surplus at the end of the year. I can't see if anybody has questions, so please let me know if there is any. The next statement is a consolidated statement of cash flows. I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is the increases and decreases of the non-cash items. And here under capital activities, you can see that almost $22 million of new assets this year. Netted against the disposals, which gives you that 20 million, which I've reflected on a couple times. Coming down to the net cash position at the end of the year. Majority of that decrease is due to purchasing some new industrial land this year that we'll see when we get to the reserve fund decrease. This next statement just shows the increases and decreases of the capital assets, those non-financial assets that I've talked about, and I've already talked about those numbers, I think, So then we get to the notes to the financial statements. I will comment on a couple things here. You'll notice here consolidation. So these do include the Board of Management, the Public Library Board, and the Police Services Board. Both the Board of Management and Public Library Board prepare separate financial statements, and those have gone to both of those boards and been approved at that level. I'd like to go forward to note number 6. So this is your post-retirement benefits. That may not be a phrase that some of you are familiar with. So this is what we accrue in today's dollars for future liabilities we pay to employees once they retire. As you can see, it's a significant liability. It's not all due in this next year. It's due over the life of those working life of those employees. I did make a comment on this note at this last sentence, talking about the fact we did this valuation in 2020. And as we all are aware, the inflation rate and the interest rates have changed significantly since then. So we will be doing a new valuation this year in 2023. And those numbers could be significantly different based on those new assumptions. Note number 7 just breaks down the deferred revenue. So this is really like your reserve funds, but these are money set aside that are specified by specific legislation or funders. So things like federal gas tax, DCs. And so you can see we maintain those as well. So that's another financial indicator. As you find all this new capital, you want to make sure that you still have reserves in the bank. The next note is your liability, or your long-term liabilities, your debt that gets repaid over the next 5 years and then thereafter. And then this really is the note that most counselors will be most interested in. This is the breakdown of that accumulated surplus that I referred to. And you can see that increase in investment in tangible capital assets. We also had an operating surplus of 2.7 million. And then in addition, we've kept our reserves, about $1 million increase there, but there is a decrease in the reserve funds. And I've talked about that. That was used for industrial land purchases as approved by council. Rest of the notes, I don't have much to say about. There are 2 schedules at the back of the statements. One is the consolidated schedule of tangible capital assets. So this shows all your capital assets broken down by components. And as you can see, the infrastructure, roads, and storm sewers and other networks are your majority of your tangible capital assets, as you would expect. And then the last schedule is the consolidated schedule of segmented information. This breaks down the revenues and expenditures by functions, which is what the FIR, which is filed with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, follows these same functions. And so this really is a segue between these financial statements and that FIR that gets filed with the province. You also have in your packages the trust fund financial statements. And I don't have a lot to say on this. There wasn't a lot of activity in this other than they earned some revenue. We did have some further donations, but there was very little expenditures during the year. And so I'm just flipping here. So you can see, as I mentioned, donations, interest, and then we spent only $507 out of this. And then the note to the financial statements on these trust funds breaks down the trust funds by the various sources of these. So I remind council that trust funds are different from reserve funds in that they've been specified as to what they can be spent on by a party outside of council, and council is the gatekeeper for those. That is my report. I would be happy to entertain any questions that somebody might have.
Thank you for that. Any questions of council? No? Seeing none? You're off the hook. That's a great, might I say, I really enjoy this. I enjoy reading it, and the explanations and everything else are relatively simple when you're really broken down this way. So thank you very much, you and your staff.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Looking for a motion. All right. Councillor Lauder?
Sorry about that. I'll move that the draft 2022 consolidated financial statements for the city of Woodstock and trust funds as prepared by Scrimgeour and Company CPA Professional Corporation with attached independent auditors report dated May the 18th, 2023 be approved.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder? Counselor Wismer Van Meer. Any discussion? Okay. Call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed? Carried. Next up, I will welcome Patricia Marshall from the Ingersoll and Area Indigenous Solidarity and Awareness Network. My apologies. Please, welcome.
Thank you, Fred. So, Kansai, Saigon, Kwe, Bonjour, Bonjour, hello. These are just a few of the many phrases that we can use to greet one another. Which one I propose to you would be your first inkling to use? Which one do you think was the first for the wind, trees, earth, and river to hear? Which ones I ask now did I begin with? Kansai, Saigon, Kwe, Bonjour. These words I use first as a way to honor the first people of this region, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. However, just like there are many words, there are many nations and many ways to honor, reconcile, and move forward. ESON does its best to help the community to be able to do so in meaningful ways. I would like to say miigwech, or thank you to Council for having me here to share with you about Ingersoll and Area's Indigenous Solidarity and Awareness Network, or ESON for short. My name is Patricia Marshall, and I am of mixed Ojibwe, Celtic, and German heritage. I am a resident of Oxford County since 2016, and I've chosen to raise my 4 resilient Indigenous children here with the help of my partner, who is a proud Haudenosaunee descendant of the Mohawk Nation. And I have now called Oxford County his home for his whole life. My professional capacity, however, is that of director of ESON. Oh. Sorry. I'm not a tech wizard, so there may be technical difficulties for me. There we go. It is important, however, before I go any further, that I acknowledge the land on which we stand and its Indigenous roots. Woodstock, I found, has an official land acknowledgement that reads, "Welcome to the city of Woodstock, situated on the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples and covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. We would like to acknowledge the history and traditional territory on which the city of Woodstock stands. We also would like to respect the long-standing relationships of the local Indigenous groups, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape, the Anishinaabe of this land and place in southwestern Ontario. We would like to recognize that Indigenous communities in close proximity to the city of Woodstock, Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation, Mississauga of the New Credit First Nation, and 6 nations of the Grand River, which consists of Mohawk, Cayuga, Seneca, Onondaga, Oneida, and Tuscarora nations. I ask, with this public statement, what has the city of Woodstock done to be active participants on the path towards truth and reconciliation since? I don't ask this to put you on the spot, but rather as to simply something to ponder. Many times people make land acknowledgements as blanket statements, as a get off the hook, or simply to stop having to make any further or immediate action. Well, the time has come for all of us in Oxford County to stop dragging our feet and honor the fact that Oxford County is part of the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty between the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people, who shared the resources of this region, and that as residents, we could and should find ways to become respectful partners in this treaty and the responsibilities that it entails. Formal government treaties such as the ones in Woodstock's land acknowledgement were made with the intention of trading ownership of land and without the full understanding of the Indigenous peoples. Therefore, consent by its very definition is in question. Indigenous peoples are connected to the land which they live, with responsibilities of stewardship for specific species of flora and fauna. The arrival of settlers and the so-called purchase or theft of lands caused the collapse of many ecosystems and even extinction of entire species, almost including Indigenous peoples themselves. Treaties with the Crown and federal governments were also only made with individual nations and were not negotiated with all nations who use the land and its resources. This further supports questions of consent and the legitimacy of these treaties, along with the limitations they impose on Indigenous people and liberties granted to settlers of the area. Both the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee had long established forms of governance and community that were directly disrupted by the arrival of settlers into this tract of land, including the colonial imposed elected council system, which superseded the long-standing hereditary councils. Both of these people welcomed settlers into these lands and taught them ways to survive and thrive. It was in the hopes that our Indigenous ancestors that the new settlers would help to share the land and load of stewardship and become partners in traditional treaties such as the dish with one spoon. An example of this would be the two-row wampum made with the Dutch peoples. This illustrated the desire to coexist peacefully side by side without disrupting the other's way of life. I bring these perspectives and information to the table in order to help with the journey of understanding and regarding the ask put forth by UNDRIP and what the principles it would imply on a local scale. Being that the Pope has just recently repudiated the doctrine of discovery, which was the original grounds and basis for colonial practices, law, religion, and land ownership to be considered the more civilized way of life, and that they would supersede the pre-established Indigenous governing bodies, land stewardship agreements, and spiritual practices, this is a monumental and pivotal time for truth and reconciliation. I recommend referencing page 8 and 9 out of the TRC report regarding the sections on reconciliation and the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, number 43 to 47. So you're probably asking who or what is ESON? So ESON itself is a collaborative network comprising of Indigenous, mixed heritage, and non-Indigenous allies. We have 4 executive board members, being Brenda Boswell as our treasurer, Giselle Lutfala as our secretary, Lisa Scott as our deputy director, and myself, Patricia Marshall, as director, along with several other community volunteers. We're a grassroots, not-for-profit organization, and we've just opened our first bank account. We meet wherever we can find space. Our meetings during COVID-19 pandemic took place in a park. During 2022, we were able to host some at indoor meetings at the ICAC or the Ingersoll Creative Arts Center. And this year we've been meeting at Ingersoll's downtown Tim Hortons. ESON was formed in the wake of the discovery of the 215 children at a residential school in Kamloops, BC in 2021. Our original intention was to try and help the community with moving forward with being active participants on the journey towards truth and reconciliation. Being that Oxford County is situated between 2 of the oldest and longest operating residential schools in Canada, and situated between numerous Indigenous communities, it was felt that actions to be taken were imperative at this time. Why does ESON exist? To date, almost 7,000 previously unmarked graves of children attending residential schools have been recovered. This doesn't include the over 6,000 known children who did not make it home from residential schools. For over 150 years, over 150,000 children were legally taken from their parents and indoctrinated into a system of hate, violence, abuse, and oppression. For 150 years, this was supported by our governments, our policing bodies, and for 150 years, Canadians were both willingly and unknowingly complicit in the perpetuation of these so-called education centers. For years, whistleblowers tried to bring an end to these injustices, or at least notify the public, yet little to nothing was ever done. This is a horrific and unchangeable part of history that we must face, honor, and do our best to reconcile. In 2015, the TRC report was released to the public, documenting the accounts of survivors and illustrating calls to action in order to work towards true truth and reconciliation. How many, I ask, have taken the time to actually read this document and digest its information to its full extent? Not many people have or are capable. We knew that thousands of children died at school. If thousands of children were to die today in the Thames Valley District School Board, we all know what would happen. Shamefully, though, when it comes to Indigenous children, it took the rediscovery of hidden children for mainstream society to begin to feel the grief and become to be even remotely accountable for making sure history is not repeated and healing occurs. The effects of residential schools, including the well-being of survivors, families, and honoring those lost and public awareness, is one of the 3 major issues Indigenous people face that ESON has been working to highlight, and is why orange is included in ESON's colors. MMIWG2S+. This is more than an acronym. These letters, number, and symbol represent a plight older than this country that Indigenous people have been forced to face and have largely had ignored by the colonial world. For centuries now, Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit people, and men have been stolen from Turtle Island, murdered with impunity, and disappeared without a trace or aid. beginning with stories like Matoka's and with the founding of the so-called New World, or Pocahontas, if you're not sure. And then even still ongoing today with stories like Linda marrying Beardy. This is an issue that cannot and should not be ignored. 60% of all murdered women are Indigenous in North America, with Indigenous women being 12 times the risk of violence and sexual assault, and Indigenous women and girls being 16 times more likely than their Caucasian counterparts to experience these traumas. This does not take into account the fact that 6 out of every 10 incidents of violence against Indigenous people goes unreported due to the fact that simply authorities do not take it seriously. This is supported by a 53% murder solve rate for Indigenous murders versus the 84% solve rate for non-Indigenous murders. Or the fact that the RCMP only formally recognizes 1,000 of the over 4,000 Indigenous deaths on the Highway of Tears that the Native Women's Association of Canada has reported. These stats are tragic. And as an Indigenous woman and mother to Indigenous children, they're terrifying. Can you imagine having to worry about these things daily? This is the reality for Indigenous people here in Oxford County too. In 2019, our Prime Minister declared murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people genocide. This month, it was once again brought up in the House of Commons and declared a national emergency. What is being done? Where is the red dress alert? When will society begin to address the 231 calls to action brought up in the final report for murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit? ESON recognizes that the social issues associated with murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people being one of the predominant 3 issues that Canadians have the power to recognize and actively help to solve. That is why red is included in our colors. When you turn on the tap, do you feel comfortable drinking from it? How come you feel that way? Now imagine that for 27 years, you could not turn on the tap and safely take a drink of water, use that water to cook, brush your teeth, or even boil to make tea. How would you feel then? This is a sad reality that many Indigenous communities face. If you prefer to have a tangible community to think about, Nisga'a First Nations in Northern Ontario would be a perfect example. They've been without access to clean water now for over 27 years, despite several attempts to highlight the issue. 2 other nearby communities without access to clean water would be Moonsea Delaware Nation and 6 Nations of the Grand River, both mentioned in Woodstock's land recognition. Many other communities go without adequate food supplies, medical care, and local education. Many Indigenous communities in Northern Ontario and other provinces do not have high schools within their communities, and this requires sending their loved ones away to larger cities, which causes the reliving of intergenerational trauma and the creation of new ones. A really big eye-opener is Thunder Bay on Prairie. It's a TV show, but it's a documentary, and so a lack of basic resources in Indigenous communities or any community in a nation that proclaims itself to be a first world nation is a deeply shameful and troubling issue. This is why ESON includes blue as our 3rd color, to highlight and represent the disproportionate lack of basic needs many Indigenous people face in this country and province alone. I'd like to quickly note also that the slides in this PowerPoint provide further information, including links at the end about these topics. And I encourage you to take the time to read them and further up on your personal understanding. So what does ESON do? ESON first began with an Orange Heart campaign as a creative display in the downtown Ingersoll core. We worked with local shopkeepers to accurately showcase the number of graves being found. We then organized our first official March for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th of 2021, with over 400 people in attendance. Community partners included United Way, Oxford Children's Aid Society, the Optimist Club of Tillsonburg, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Oxford, Town of Ingersoll, and Amaran Friendship Center. On our second March on September 30th, 2022 was enhanced through a partnership with the Ingersoll Creative Arts Center. This gave us some indoor space and coincided with an Indigenous art exhibit. ESON also has been responsible for establishing a local red dress tree found downtown Ingersoll on important dates to honor the spirits of murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. In late 2022, ESON began working with the Ingersoll BIA regarding a crosswalk to highlight Indigenous issues. You can see the design for this on the far right of the current slide. This design highlights the 3 social issues Indigenous people face that ESON has been discussing and has been created with colors and symbolism tied to these issues. Orange with a handprint for those affected by the IRS, blue with a water drop to highlight the disproportionate lack of basic resources in Indigenous communities, as well as red with a dress for murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. Due to the onset of the snow, however, the installation was delayed until June 20th, 2023. This crosswalk is planned to be installed on King Street, crossing from the Ingersoll Nurse Practitioner Clinic to the Memorial Park, where we conduct our Truth and Reconciliation opening ceremonies. This location also has historical ties to the Detroit Path, which ran across Oxford Township, connecting the head of Lake Ontario to what is now known as Detroit. We have also been doing our best to help set up pop-up tables at community events and festivals in order to help raise awareness and give more access to education for members of the community. This year, ESON was successful in obtaining a grant from the Community Supporting Youth Futures Oxford to offer a new program to help educate youth aged 6 to 16 about indigeneity in order to help the next generation know better to do better, while also addressing calls to action number 66 and 63 from the TRC. We call this program Indigeno and partnered with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Oxford County to deliver it in a safe and inclusive manner. We've also recently applied for a grant from the Community Services Recovery Fund to help us with our vision, communications, and future plans. In April, ESON participated in Ingersoll's annual community cleanup along the Thames River as an act of responsible land stewardship. It was refreshing to be engaged in such a good-natured and well-established event like this. Although the rain did try to be our tag-along, it provided the chance to extend our community clean for the full week. Also in April of 2023, ESON stood with Oxford County Pride in Norwich against their motion to ban the flying of any non-government flags, which would include the Pride flag, inclusive Pride flag in June, along with flags regarding truth and reconciliation, such as the Every Child Matters flag in September. ESON still stands with Oxford County Pride as an ally and as advocates for the Two-Spirit community. ESON wants to make it clear that Oxford County is a rainbow of diversity and that it should be reflected by our elected officials in any capacity they are capable to do so, included and not limited to the flying of flags of solidarity with minority groups like the 2S LGBTQIA and Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. You can count on us to be at Oxford County's Pride Family Day this year with information and Indigenous awareness for Pride merchandise by Becca Neepen, an Indigenous vendor and Woodstock resident, and an ESON collaborator. Sorry, one moment. I need to take a breath. I keep stuttering. On May 6th of this year, ESON hosted its first annual Honoring Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit event along the Trans-Canada Trail, which included display of red dresses in the main park, accompanied by information about MMIWG2S+, including the calls to justice. This night concluded with an introspective red dress walk after speeches and spoken word were shared. We also had an Indigenous vendor offering MMIW awareness merchandise to participants who wish to continue to raise awareness past the night of the event. We plan to continue to host this event annually in Tillsonburg and hope it will grow in size and awareness. We, of course, are also in the plans of planning our annual event for the March for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th, which will include our march, a red dress tree, and Indigenous Studies Professor Cody Grote as a guest speaker. We have an open call out for Indigenous vendors, drummers, artists, and speakers who wish to partake in this year's event. And we also are looking for community sponsors who wish to help make this year's March for Truth and Reconciliation happen. We're also now in the works of collaborating with Stitch Supper Club to highlight some Indigenous food at their June 22nd Stitch Supper Club meal. Being that it is the day after National Indigenous Day, it was a perfect opportunity for community collaboration. ESON's also now exploring the possibility of offering basic adult information sessions as a result of community feedback that would take place throughout Oxford County. In conclusion, it took until the discovery of the 215 tiny souls in unmarked graves in 2021 for communities to do something about it. Not when the reports were published in the early days of residential schools, not when Indigenous communities and their survivors were brave enough to share their stories, not when Ingersoll OPP officers were picking up young runaways to return them to the Mohawk Institute, not when Indigenous mothers, children, and partners tried to alert the authorities of their missing and murdered loved ones, not when the TRC report was released with its recommendations in 2015. No, it took the shocking recovery of 215 for this community to do anything about these atrocities and to become active participants in truth and reconciliation. For that, I do feel shame. I'm sure many of us do. However, I do feel gratitude and pride that ESON has been able to do their best to lead by example and to make truth and reconciliation a priority in Oxford County and Woodstock itself. I feel pride and gratitude also that you as a council have made it your priority to learn and observe some of the calls to action in the TRC, beginning with your formal land acknowledgement and continuing with things like having me here today and moving forward. I know that these are powerful observations and statements and a lot of information to digest. However, I do wish to ask something of Oxford City Council. My ask is for your formal endorsement and support of ESON's actions by means of promotion of our events and information on your social media pages and website. We also ask that Woodstock City Council table and present an annual report illustrating how the council has or has not met the calls to justice and calls to action outlined in the TRC report and the MMIW final report. These asks are made to help the community to move forward with being active participants in truth and reconciliation. My Uncle Blair, a 60 scoop survivor from Mishkegowman First Nations, taught me a powerful phrase in Ojibwe when I began walking this path, and it stuck with me every step of the way, and I wish to leave it with you. Kina Givizimen Maji, Manawa Gazman, Ambidash Ga Manawa Gazian. This means we came to be happy, so go be happy. There's no truer sentiment or phrase I've ever heard about the hopes for moving forward for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. Chimigwash for having me today, and I hope that ESON and the City of Woodstock can move forward being great partners in the path to truth and reconciliation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Ms. Marshall? Councillor Leatherborough.
Through your worship, thank you so much for coming and for your presentation. We have to get to truth before we can get to reconciliation, so I know some of the information can make people uncomfortable, but thank you for your advocacy. I follow your work closely, and I wanted to bring up that I moved to the city of Woodstock in 2013, and shortly after December 5th, 2014, I pulled up this Heart FM article where Mary Reed, art gallery director and curator, was quoted for the red dress campaign that was in Museum Square. So we're almost at 10 years since we've had another red dress campaign, and that partnership was with Zonta and DART during the 16 days of activism through Zonta. So I look forward to working with you and continuing to educate and connect residents across Oxford County. So thank you.
Councillor Wheaton.
Thank you, through you. There was a wealth of information on your slides, and unfortunately, I would have loved to have read them before our meeting tonight to be more familiar with your content. Could I ask that those slides be shared with the clerk's office so that they can be circulated to us as councillors? Because I think there's a lot of really good information there that we can learn from. So I appreciate that you put it together. I'd love to see it in detail.
Of course, I apologize. There was technical difficulties. I didn't want to send. It was too large of a file for an email. So.
I think I was going to suggest that as well. Any other questions or comments? I just want to say thank you for all the work you're doing actively for the truth and reconciliation for not only Woodstock, but all of Oxford County. So thank you. Thank you. Looking for a motion on the floor. Councillor Leatherborough.
Moved by myself that Woodstock City Council receive the presentation from the Ingersoll and Area Indigenous Solidarity and Awareness Network as information.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Wismer Van Meer. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. Thank you. Next up, we do have Emily Antonio and Frank Gross from Transitioning the Blue Box Program, Extended Producer Responsibility from County. Welcome.
Will we have our presentation available on the screen? Scroll through or, all right. PDF there. This one here? Oh, sorry. There it is. Thank you. Yeah, gotcha. Thank you for having us tonight, Mr. Mayor, council and staff. We're here tonight to provide an update on the new blue box regulation that will be transitioning to full extended producer responsibility. In the interest of time, Pam and I will just speak quickly to some of the key points in our presentation, and we can answer some questions at the end. Under the new blue box regulation, producers will be fully accountable and financially responsible for collecting and recycling of packaging, paper products, and packaging-like materials. Municipal programs will be transitioning to the producer-led program from July 1st, 2023 this year until December 31st, 2025. During the transition period, producers will be required to maintain the same level of service as the municipal programs. By January 1st, 2026, all municipalities are scheduled to have transitioned to the province-wide common collection system, and municipalities will no longer be responsible for managing the traditional blue box program. For Oxford County, this will result in approximately $2 million in annual savings. The new blue box program led by the producers is meant to be a residential program, but will also include public spaces, schools, not-for-profit long-term care, and retirement homes. Producers will not be responsible to provide blue box collection services to other IC&I locations and are not obligated to collect from drop-off depots in municipalities that have had existing curbside collection programs. Producers will also be required to report annually and meet various collection and recycling targets, as well as provide promotion and education materials to residents. In the transition schedule that's part of the blue box regulation, Oxford County and the area municipalities are scheduled to transition on December 31st, 2025, right at the end of the transition period. And during the transition period, there'll be no change to the blue box collection service in the county and city of Woodstock. Circular Materials is a producer responsible organization, or a PRO, representing the various producers, and they've been selected to administer the common collection system in Ontario for the new blue box regulation. As the program administrator, they're responsible for procurement of collection contractors and receiving facilities during and after the transition period. Circular Materials has been working to establish collection programs for those municipalities that are transitioning first. And they've indicated that the RFP for collection services that includes our area in the Oxford County catchment area will be issued later this year in Q4. And I will pass it on to Pam.
Thank you. Good evening. Under the current blue box program, only selected residential sources are eligible for collection. Municipalities across Ontario have been providing curbside collection services to non-eligible sources who are located along a collection route and who are able to meet program requirements. These services that have been provided to the non-eligible sources have been done so with the understanding that any program costs associated with their material would not be covered by the producers. So funding for these non-eligible sources have been offset by blue box revenue sales and the tax levy. Under the transition program, non-eligible sources located along a collection route will not receive curbside collection. Non-eligible sources under the transition program are defined as anything considered to be that is not considered to be a household, not-for-profit, long-term care facility, or retirement home, or a school, both private and public schools. So examples would be your BIAs, churches, hospitals, municipal buildings, etc. Those would be the examples of your non-eligible sources. It's unknown exactly how many non-eligible sources participate in the curbside collection program across the county. We know that within the city of Woodstock, through audits that they have conducted, approximately 7% of the material that they collect through their curbside program comes from non-eligible sources. And across the county in total, approximately 450 tons annually of blue box materials comes from non-eligible sources. So the following maps are of our three main urban areas. And these maps depict in blue residential areas and in pink properties that would be identified as a non-eligible source. So anything in pink that's in blue is located along, most likely is located along an existing curbside collection route. And under our current system, they will receive curbside collection, but in 2026, they'll no longer be eligible for that service. Once the Blue Box program transitions to producer responsibility, we expect that we may notice some changes in how the service of the Blue Box program is delivered. So it is possible that you may notice that the frequency of collection may change, or the day that your Blue Box is collected could possibly change. We may also notice that garbage and recycling are not collected on the same day. As well, currently the type of collection system that is in place may also change. So currently within the city, you have a 2-stream Blue Box collection system. The producers may choose to keep that system, or they may choose to implement a single stream collection system like what's present in the rest of the within the rest of the county. Other things that you might notice is customer service inquiries will now no longer be fielded by the area municipalities and at the county level. Those will be handled directly by the producers and any contractors that they have hired to deliver those services on their behalf. The transition program may also affect how public spaces and convenience depots may be operated. So producers are not obligated to maintain the same public space recycling locations as currently used in municipalities. They will be required to meet a certain requirement as far as the number of recyclable locations, but so it could change from what's currently being used. A convenience depot is defined as a depot that's operating in an area where there's currently curbside collection services. So any depot that's operating in that kind of scenario will no longer receive funding for any Blue Box materials that it handles. So right now, the 2 depots in the county, within the county, both at the Oxford County Waste Management Facility and the Enviro Depot, may very well be affected by this change. As far as not receiving funding for any eligible material under the program. So next steps. We are going around to all the area municipalities to provide them with an update on the transition, the Blue Box to full producer responsibility. We're making sure that we want to make sure that municipalities and the residents are aware of these upcoming changes and possible implications. We want to seek direction from county council on whether or not the county should be partaking in the competitive bid process to deliver future Blue Box collection services. And we'll be sending a report back to council at the end of next month, giving them the outcome of our discussions with the area municipalities through these delegations, and to seek some direction going forward with how they'd like us to proceed. So that's the end of our presentation. Thank you for having us, and Frank and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for that, because for those that didn't watch county council, that was about an hour presentation at county that we went over a fair bit, but needless to say, I think there's more questions than answers. But council, any questions for the delegation? Councillor Schanberg?
Yeah, from the mayor through to our delegation. I guess my best question, and I'm sure Ms. Antonio would be the best one to answer the question, is I know through Zero Waste Oxford and other programs that have been available out there to try to divert and keep as much recycling material as possible out of the Salford landfill site. What currently, for people viewing, but also for our own information, would you say is the lifespan of the Salford landfill with the current programs that are in place?
Through the mayor, currently we are have another approximately 35 years left at the landfill site.
Would you not, and I know you're sort of delivering the news as issued from the province of Ontario to say that they want to change the blue box program. Would you not think that 35 years will be reduced significantly if this program is instituted? Maybe you're not allowed to give an editorial statement.
Well, so under our current system, we have municipalities were charged with achieving a 60% diversion rate, and we're somewhere around the 40% that we've achieved. Under this new program, they have individual material diversion rates for each material type, ranging anywhere from 75% to 96% based on the type of material. So should the producers be successful in meeting those targets, then the program would be very successful. But it's going to take at least a year of being in the program before we know kind of what their results were.
And the fact that the industrial and commercial sector is not included, would that not be a detriment to the proposed system? Again, from your point of view as to the number of years you yourself have been experienced working at the Salford site and diverting.
It is a cause
Recycling.
for concern. Under the existing program, those non-eligible sources were not allowed to participate in the program anyways, but because municipalities had control over or had the authority over the program, we offered municipalities across Ontario offered that service to any business that could meet the program requirements, and then they took the cost on themselves. With that said, that is a big question that most municipalities right now are struggling with is, what do we do with those businesses that have been receiving service that will no longer receive service? Because we recognize that there's a strong possibility that material could end up in landfill, which we don't want. And that's one of the questions that we will be seeking direction from County Council on is how would they like us to proceed? I don't know if you have anything you'd like to share, Frank?
If I can just add to that. So one of the very first things mentioned and one of your very first slides was a $2 million savings. Well, it's fair to say that $2 million savings is certainly not going to be realistic if we were to offer people at least minimum same services they're used to every single day, because yeah, this is going to be a disaster in my opinion right off the bat. Councillor Leatherbrow.
Through your worship to the delegations, this could be a loaded question, but do you have any insight as to how it was decided who would be eligible and who would not be eligible? Again, using the BIAs for an example.
Well, so even from the back in, would have been around 2002, 2004, when the Blue Box program came out, it was only for residential services. And the premise was that if you were in business, that was part of a normal business expense that you should be taking on as a business. That was, I think, the approach that they had adopted back then, and they've carried that through. And that's at least the approach that the province had taken.
Any other questions, council for the delegation? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for your time. I'm looking for a motion on the floor. Councillor Wismer Van Meer.
Moved by myself that Woodstock City Council received the presentation from the County of Oxford regarding transitioning the Blue Box program to extended to producer responsibility as information.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Wheaton. Any further discussion? Councillor Schoenberg.
Yeah, just really a statement to to you, the mayor, and then to everyone here that I would think at some point in time, we'll have to get some sort of a report from the city works department to sort of say, here's how things could be different or will be different in the costs, and analyzing all of it to sort of say, maybe there's a city of Woodstock solution to the scenario as far as blue box pickup goes. And the other things that we wanted to, and I'm speaking obviously as a member of the Environment Advisory Committee, to sort of say that at some point in time to be able to pick up organics and other materials too. It seems like we were gradually moving towards a certain direction, and the province of Ontario, saying nothing against the county of Oxford and the great work they were doing towards zero waste and keeping the Salford landfill site going for 35 plus more years, that maybe some of those good news things may be difficult to maintain.
No, definitely the way it sits right now. Councillor Wheaton.
Thank you. Just to add to that through you, your worship, that I think that in addition to that, that if we can continue to have open conversations on what this means to the city, in cooperation with the county, that those dialogues will help us all to make the best possible decisions when December 31st, 2025 rolls around, and that we are prepared as a community and for our residents and as a city, as a service delivery provider.
And Mr. Locke, of course, if you don't mind making a couple of comments from staff's opinion.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, through the worship. So we've been monitoring this for quite some time now when this came out. So we're attending webinars with circular materials. We're looking at we're getting into that first phase, happens in July. So we'll be luckily able to learn from how it goes in those other municipalities. I'm thankful that we're not one of those municipalities, and I apologize to those municipalities for what I think they're going to have to go through initially and work out a lot of these details. But a lot of the comments that we hear on there is, how can you have a truck go past a business and not pick up that commodity when it's right there? All your sunk costs are going right past. So you got the truck, you got the labor dollars, you're driving past that recyclable, if you will. So we're working through those. We'll see how the first phase goes. I expect that, to Councillor Schadenberg's comment about a report, I would expect that we would bring a report with options and a Woodstock solution, or our options towards a Woodstock solution later this year. Once we've learned from some of these other municipalities. We also will be doing some things, the Enviro Depot right now, we collect recyclables there, but we do not discern between ICI materials and residential. So we're gonna split that so that we have some abilities to make decisions based on what quantities we get from each sector. So those would pretty much be my comments at this point in time. We're kind of in a wait and see. I am on zero waste, and we do have some full discussions countywide with this topic. It's been a hot topic. The other municipality that does their own collection is Southwest Oxford. So maybe there's more than just a Woodstock solution. Maybe there's a bigger solution there. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Any other discussion? Okay, obviously, we're going to be talking about this again in the near future. All those in favor of the motion? None opposed, carried. Thank you. Next, I would ask Abby Zelinski from the Woodstock Accessibility Advisory Committee. Come forward. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. Dear Council, every year, starting on the last Sunday in May, Canadians celebrate National Accessibility Week. Founded in 1988 as National Access Awareness Week and inspired by Rick Hansen's Men in Motion World Tour, this week is an opportunity to celebrate Canadians with disabilities and raise awareness of the critical need for accessibility and inclusion for all in our community and workplaces. Individuals with disabilities are impacted daily by barriers to accessible information, independent access to facilities, to employment, transportation, and accessible communication support. Such barriers often affect an individual's ability to fully participate in community life. National Accessibility Week is an opportunity to celebrate the valuable contributions and leadership of Canadians with disabilities, highlight the work of people, organizations, and communities that are removing barriers, and reflect on ongoing efforts to become a better, more inclusive Canada. This letter was written by the chair of our committee, Alan Taylor, on behalf of the Woodstock Accessibility Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the delegation? Councillor Leatherborough, mind?
Through your worship to,
Almost done.
to the delegation, Mr. Avi, just want to say thank you for reading the letter. We are both on the Accessibility Advisory Committee. And there is a lot of ambition and idea on that committee, so happy to sit alongside you. And thanks for coming forward tonight to read this on Alan's behalf and the committees.
Any other questions or comments with council? Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Looking for a motion on the floor. Councillor Leatherborough.
Moved by myself that Woodstock City Council received the presentation from the Woodstock Accessibility Advisory Committee regarding National Accessibility Week as information.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Lauder. Discussion. We do have a staff member here if you have any questions for what is involved. We won't mention any names, Ms. McKinnon, but all right, seeing none, I guess you're off the hook. With that, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. Thank you. And 8E has withdrawn as a delegation this evening. So 8F would be Evan Whitman, Hugh Handy, Cheryl Schindrick, and Ryan Hicks. Welcome and thank you for being here again tonight.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Good evening, your worship and members of council. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Cheryl Schindrick, and Evan Whitman and Hugh Handy and Ryan Hicks are here with me this evening. And I'm here to speak in connection with item 9A, which is the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications for the former Cedar Creek Golf Club lands. I'm here on behalf of Woodstock Developments, Inc. And we want to support the staff report that is in your package at 9A today. And certainly we endorse the recommendations in that report and would hope that council would indeed indicate their support for the OPA and approve in principle the zoning bylaw amendment that is also set out in that report. We are here to answer any questions. In addition to the people that are here with me this evening, I do have members of our team online and also available to respond to any questions. I do want to acknowledge the submission made by Ms. Sawyer for this evening's council meeting, and just to say to council that the items, in particular the transportation or traffic questions that she had, they are covered in our technical submissions, and we did provide a specific response to those comments to your staff just before this evening's council meeting. So we're confident that those matters have been addressed in the materials that are in the file. And so finally, just with respect to the next steps for this file, following this evening, hopefully with council's endorsement, we will proceed to the County of Oxford. And ultimately, we're looking forward to an approval and the conveyance of the 40 acres of land to the city for purposes of a public park. So that concludes my remarks for this evening, your worship. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions right now.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Lauder.
Yes, through the mayor to Ms. Schindrick. In the letter, she mentioned the increased lighting for lighting posts that will remain on from dusk to dawn and illuminated signs and vehicle headlights. Will there be something done to help with that type of thing?
certainly, through you, your worship, to Councillor Lauder. We will be going through a site plan approval process for this site. And that will give us ample opportunity to deal with those kinds of interface questions and issues and lighting and so on. So we will be most definitely working closely with your staff on that.
Thank you. Any other questions for the delegation? Or any staff or partners that are here tonight? No? I'd just like to say thank you and thank you all for coming on Monday evening when the public was here. It was always good to see so much support and being willingness to answer all the questions. So, and of course, as City of Woodstock, I'm quite excited at the idea of being able to bring on 40 acres of more parkland for residents to enjoy is the definite plus this arrangement like this. So thank you.
We share in that enthusiasm.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There are no resolution required as this item is dealt with under consideration of planning reports. Item 9A, that brings us to item 9A. Looking for a motion, Councillor Tate.
I'll make the motion that Woodstock City Council advise County Council that the city supports the application to amend the official plan file number OP 22-26-8 submitted by Cedar Creek Golf Course Limited, care of Woodstock Developments, Inc. for lands legally described as Part Lot 2021, Plan 1600, Part 3 and 9 of 41R 5666, City of Woodstock, to redesignate the subject lands to high-density residential to facilitate the development of a 10-story, 125-unit apartment building on the subject lands. And further, that Woodstock City Council approve in principle the zone change application file number ZN 8-22-22 submitted by Cedar Creek Golf Course Limited, care of Woodstock Developments, Inc. to rezone the lands to special residential zone 4 to facilitate the development of a 10-story, 125-unit apartment building. And further, that any comments received from the public in relation to this planning matter were considered in the decision.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Wheaton. Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you. As noted, these are applications to allow for the development of an apartment building on this subject property. The applicants did submit a number of studies in support of the development, including an environmental impact study, archaeological assessment, functional sourcing report, geotechnical report, shadow study, traffic impact study, arborist report, environmental site assessment, and a planning justification report. The requested zone change would allow for reduced parking of 166 parking spaces from the required 207 spaces, reduced minimum lot area, reduced front yard depth on Juliana, reduced exterior side yard width on Lampman Place, increasing the maximum building height from 8 stories to 10, and permitting parking in the front yard of the building, as well as the allowing for reduced setback of the parking area from Lampman Place. This property does have a number of constraints resulting from the floodplain of Cedar Creek. The applicant's done extensive work with the Conservation Authority to identify the flood limits and ensure that the building and parking will remain out of those flood limits. Given that there is an inability to provide all the required parking, the building will have an underground parking structure as well as surface parking. Through the site plan approval process, they'll have to work with the Conservation Authority to refine the design of the building parking area retaining walls, as well as the relocation of the trunk sanitary sewer that currently goes through the site. Overall planning are supportive of the application. It does comply with the official plan policies for new additional high density sites. It's also in compliance with the provincial policy statement policies for additional intensification and respecting natural heritage features. And as such, staff recommend approval of the application.
Thank you. Any questions for the planner? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much. Last opportunity for any questions of any other staff before I call the question. Counselor Leatherborough.
Through your worship, just general comments. I had actually reached out to Mr. Gilbert today just because I wanted to have a rough estimate of what the density is currently across Woodstock. Not shovel-ready ground, things like that, because I understand some neighbors and residents are always on the fence with new growth and what that could look like and how that could impact their homes. So don't mind me as I read off my paper, but the 2021 census said 385 dwelling units in an apartment of flat, deemed apartment or flat in a duplex, 2,285 dwelling units in an apartment in a building that has fewer than 5 stories, 1,680 dwelling units in what's deemed an apartment, a building that has 5 or more stories. And that total is 4,350 units. So depending whether you include 5 stories or fewer as high density, it is in the range of 8 to 20%. And I say that because I know we are seeing more intensification, we're approving more high density, affordable units, and attainable housing is always on our minds. And I do encourage these developers and future developers to really consider how that can benefit our community and others. But just for the general public, more density does allow healthy growth and variety of housing. And I just wanted to share those numbers because it really stood out to me, and thank Mr. Gilbert for getting that to me today.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Counselor Shanberg.
Yeah, simply a comment, your worship. I guess when it's all said and done, I've been on the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority Board now for over 4 years, and I really want to sort of publicly thank, even though obviously she's not within earsight of this conversation, but Laura Ian Collin, who's the planner from Upper Thames River, for being able to supply us, and I passed along emails to everybody, the up-to-date sort of 250-year floodplain mapping of the area. And it's one of those things that sort of say, well, the UTRCA can comment on a lot of the projects that might be going on as far as residential, especially in the city of Woodstock, but specifically this one because of the size of the golf course and the fact that almost entirety of the entire golf course was built on a floodplain and will remain as such, and therefore become green space for the city of Woodstock, except for this small portion and another small portion, I guess, on the bottom of Salter Street, which will be coming to us as a planning item at some point.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? And seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. Thank you very much. Next, we have CP 2023-126, review of a place to grow and provincial policy statements. Councillor Wheaton.
Thank you. That the city of Woodstock received a report regarding a review of a place to grow and provincial policy statement as information, and that staff communicate to the County of Oxford the city's support for a consolidated province-wide response.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder with a note. There was a little bit of addition to what's on the motion. Councillor Leatherborough. Okay, second. No, that's okay. Just making sure it was second. Want to make sure you knew what you were seconding. Mr. Gilbert.
I'll give a brief overview of some of the changes to the PPS. So the province released a draft PPS document, which they're now calling the provincial planning statement, not policy statement, on April 6th for a 60-day comment period, along with a number of other changes made through Bill 97. Typically, the PPS has been reviewed in over 5-year periods. Every 5 years it comes up for review, and it's a fulsome consultation process with a lot of supporting documentation, implementation guidance, along with training sessions from provincial staff. However, this draft is different. There's none of that accompanies the proposed document. As well, the draft doesn't include the natural heritage policies. It's identified that they'll be released at a further date. Given that the initial focus of our review was on areas of major change. So what the province is proposing is to combine the PPS with the Places to Grow Act which applied to the greater Golden Horseshoe, which was the GTA and surrounding area. So they're combining it into one document. There's the number of changes that still conflict with the two documents now that they're merged into one. Generally, the PPS policies are to be read in their entirety, and municipalities can still generally go beyond those minimum requirements. But we've identified two areas of major concern: the agricultural policies and the settlement area policies. For agricultural policy, I'll just quickly over some of these. The province made explicit changes to include ARUs to be permitted on farms. Also, the major change that we're focused on is which would require municipalities to permit up to 3 residential lots to be severed from a property where agriculture is the principal use of that parcel. They've identified certain limited criteria that would be applied to that to scope where that could occur. But basically, Oxford and any other municipality would be mandated to approve those severances. The scope of that change is hard to understand, hard to communicate. In Oxford, there's roughly 6,200 agricultural properties in the county. If each property had 3 lots severed from that, that would be approximately 18,600 rural residential lots. And if each of those lots is between 1 to 2 acres in size, which is what we normally see, that would be a 5 to 10% loss of Oxford's total tillable agricultural land. This same amount of land could accommodate anywhere between 185,000 units to 370,000 units if it was to occur in a rural settlement area or a service settlement area such as the city. And it's just noted that that 18,600 units that would equal in an urban area that would be 370,000 units. Currently, all of Oxford only has 50,000 units. So the scope of it is quite large. Along with the permanent loss of agricultural land, there's other impacts. Would increase conflict with agricultural operations, limit establishment of new and expansion of existing livestock barns, which is an important component of Oxford agricultural economy, as well as an increased demand on rural services. Oxford County Council approved changes to the official plan agricultural policies, I believe it was last March. And through those policies, we identified other options to provide additional housing in the rural area, which wouldn't have the same impacts on agricultural land base, which included ARUs on rural, residential, and agricultural lots, the splitting of existing oversized rural residential lots, so there'd be no new loss of agricultural land, expansion of fully serviced rural settlements, as well as minor infill or rounding out of other rural settlements that won't negatively impact agriculture. For the growth management and settlement area expansions, the proposed changes would change the requirements for a planning horizon from a maximum of 25 years to a minimum of 25 years. Would also weaken requirements to justify settlement area expansions. They have continued to require that the growth planning be conducted by the upper tier with allocations to municipalities through that. Some of the concern with the excessive planning horizon is that when you have to plan for a minimum of 25 years, that becomes very disconnected from your municipal master plans, from your development charges studies. So it becomes really hard to link the expected growth with existing municipal plans that try to predict and accommodate growth in an orderly and fiscally responsible manner. As well, the requirements for protecting agricultural land they seem to have been weakened. And also, there isn't much language in the proposed document of whether or not a privately initiated settlement expansion would be subject to an appeal. Currently, if a private proponent comes, for example, to the city and asks to expand the city boundary, and the city or county said no to it, there'd be no appeal right to that. In the proposed document, it's not clear if that's still the case or if that would change. Some other changes in the document include specific references to the coordination of planning for schools and daycares with planning for growth. They removed the term of affordable housing. They're trying to link it to the language in the housing service managers. They've increased flexibility for changes to employment areas. Currently, if you have an employment area and you wish to redesignate that for residential development, you have to go through a comprehensive review or a full justification of why you don't need that land. It looks like there'd be increased flexibility for converting land for residential purposes. And other policies that have disappeared include ones that we've used in the past for promoting the vibrancy of downtowns. That those policies are absent in the new PPS, which again we have relied on that for some planning applications in the past. Staff are working with providing a coordinated response with other municipalities and other both planning directors and professional planning stakeholder groups to provide a common and coordinated response to the document. As well, there'll be a further report on the proposed changes in front of County Council next week. And we'll also be providing an updated report once the natural heritage policies have been released for consultation. As I noted, currently it's just a blank section, and it just notes that they'll be released at a further date. That looks happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of council? No? Councillor Wheaton?
Or I have more of a comment if you want to entertain questions first, or
Questions and comments is fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I may.
That's
Through
correct.
you, your worship, Eric, you've indicated that up to 18,600 units could be put into rural townships on prime agricultural land. And you might wonder, what is the urban impact to that? You might think that how does something happening in Embro impact Woodstock? But I think it raises major concerns around education, around groundwater protection, aggregate extraction, highway safety, and traffic. And as I said at City Council, that while there is a tremendous need for housing, that we really shouldn't be developing sporadically on unserviced farmland. That makes a lot more sense. We wouldn't build 18,600 homes right next to VUTEC or Toyota. So why would we build 18,000 units amongst agriculture industry that is a key economic driver to Ontario's economy? I think it makes more sense to utilize density targets and servicing capability and to develop 500 to 800 acres in Woodstock, Tillsonburg, Ingersoll, and Thamesford, rather than 8,000 acres of prime agricultural land, 18,000 acres of prime agricultural land taking out of production. So as I said in the motion, I think it's our opportunity to use our voice to be a part of a coordinated province-wide municipal response before the June 2nd, 2023 closing date for comments.
Thank you. Councillor Schoenberg?
Yeah, of course, since the Oxford County has the planning rights for Oxford County, and that's sort of the way it works. As long as there's not additional service communities added to the list to allow for additional larger subdivisions and communities that are currently not serviced in theory, in essence, and I'm thinking of places like Salford and Swedenborg and Princeton, then I could live with some of this. But again, you're bringing us the news about what's coming from the provincial policy statement. So it's similar to our Blue Box program report that we had earlier in the meeting, where you're sort of the bearer of the news. So,
Mhm.
thanks.
That sums it up well. Yeah,
Yeah.
recognize we won't shoot the messenger. I do have some serious concerns as mayor, for the future for farming in our area. We've got prime farmland. I know that. I know people don't like when we talk about boundary adjustments and everything else, but here's an example where we can, as urban centers, not just us, but Ingersoll, Tillsonburg, and all other or towns can do so much more with far less land loss. There's some major concerns I have, and I really encourage us to work together as communities and neighbors to try to find a solution that is good for Oxford County. Because I do not want to see, just like Councillor Wheaton said, to have that much land wasted for again, single family homes, when I think we've been teaching everyone that we are infilling. We want to do so much more than we ever have before, and we recognize the provincial goals they have, and we're ready and willing to help out with those. But we need to do that in urban centers, in my opinion, than again, out in farms. With that, if there's no other questions or comments, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next up, we have consideration of correspondence. 10A. Gangatatram Ambicare for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion event, request to place yard signs. Looking for a motion on the floor. Councillor Leatherborough,
Moved by myself that Woodstock City Council approves the request to place temporary signs, subject to staff approval to promote the Ambicare for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion event on May 27th, 2023.
for a seconder, Councillor Wheaton. Discussion? Any questions? Councillor Wheaton or comments?
Yeah, thank you through you. I support the event. I support signage. I do want to hope that staff give direction back to the applicants that there are appropriate places to put signage and there are inappropriate places to put signage. In the letter, it does indicate city parks. I think that that might not be the most ideal location for event signage. That, you know, boulevards, main intersections, but that they should be ground mounted and not stapled or taped or nailed to utility poles, as I have seen recently from some events that we approved in the last couple of weeks. So a reasonable distance from fire hydrants, crosswalks, as long as we can offer safe visibility. Yeah, support the event and signage for it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Shanberg?
I do have a question from the mayor through to our Works Department, Dan Locke, and I guess the question pertains to the fact that obviously in this scenario, this public event, which is going to be a nonprofit event raising money for charity, so therefore it seemingly is a good event, and they're asking us permission to put signs up, but quite honestly, they already have the signs up. But what about the rest of the signs that seem to be coming up throughout the city of Woodstock? I know we have policies, for example, and people don't seemingly necessarily always ask permission to put these signs up. And to me, it's a bit of future landfill stuff. Maybe Harold DeHaan can answer the question from engineering or Dan Locke. It becomes future, maybe sometimes non-recyclable material, but it definitely becomes a bit of an eyesore too to the community.
So through your worship, I'll speak to Councillor's question on the work side of things, and then I'll kick it over to Harold on the bylaw side of things. So from my side of things, in any of the properties where these go up and we're cutting grass, it's a hindrance. We have to get out, move them. So we do like the ability to comment. I like some of the comments that you, Councillor Wheaton, mentioned about where to put them. I'd say up against poles so that, you know, you can get the bulk of the cutting done. There's ways to put them up that doesn't hinder our ability to do the task that we're out there doing. So there is more and more of them. I think that the more that get approved here at council, the more there's ones that aren't approved. So just keep that in mind. I think that's my personal piece on it, and I'll kick it over to Harold on the other.
Your worship, through the counselor. Yes, we do have bylaws against signs. They do need city approval to be putting signs out. Matter of fact, our bylaw department, there has been a lot of signs popping up lately. Our bylaw department has actually spent the last couple of days pulling a lot of those signs. We probably pulled some of them for the event that was mentioned this evening. Usually what we'll do is we try to notify them, say, hey, you know, you can't do this, and you come pick your sign up at your signs up at the office. It's really, we try to educate rather than ticket, because it's kind of hard to make the ticket stick. So, but yeah, they do need approval.
Thank you for the comments. Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. So tonight we have no staff presentations or mayor's report, no council reports, but we do have some department reports. First up, 14A1, Statement of Revenue and Expenditures. Councillor Tate.
I'll move that Woodstock City, oops. Shut up. That Woodstock City Council receive the statement of revenue and expenditure and the statement of capital expenditures for the period ending April 30th, 2023 as information.
Seconded by Councillor Schadenberg. Discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. Next up, we have 14A2 final tax rates. Councillor Lauder. Seconded by Councillor Schadenberg.
Thank you. I'll move that Woodstock City Council approve the final tax rates and that the necessary bylaw be read.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or questions of staff? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. 14A3, Woodstock Board of Management Downtown Area Special Area Charges. Councillor Leatherborough.
Moved by myself that Woodstock City Council approve the BIA tax rates and that the necessary bylaw be read.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder on the motion. Councillor Lauder. Discussion? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. 14A4, application for tax relief under section 357 of the Municipal Act. Looking for a motion. Councillor Wismer Van Meer.
I move that Woodstock City Council directs the treasurer to cancel, reduce, or refund the tax levied in 2021 and 2022 as detailed on the attached reports.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder on the motion. Councillor Leatherborough. Discussion or questions of council? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. Next up, we have engineering. Now, this is a little exciting. Yep. So 14B1, street naming for Woodstock Meadows subdivision. Looking for a motion. Councillor Schadenberg.
Just have to bear with me because it's going to be a bit of a long list because there's a number of streets to be named in the subdivision, but the Woodstock City Council named the streets in the Woodstock Meadows subdivision as follows. Street A would be Meadows Gate. B, Upper Thames Drive, which is an existing street, continuation of one. Street C, Periwinkle Crescent. D, Trillium Drive. E, MacArthur Avenue. F, Violet Road. G, Wismer Way. G, Sunflower Street. H, Iris Street. H, Jersey Street. I, Primrose. J, Violet Road. K, Astor Road. L, Magnolia Lane. M, MacArthur Avenue, which is the continuation of a street mentioned earlier. P, Mayflower Crescent. Q is Sunflower Street. I believe that one comes up twice just because they're continuation streets.
Counselor Sharma, I think
Yep.
we skipped one. Did we skip street N? I'm sorry.
N, Aberdeen Road, okay. P,
you.
Mayflower Crescent. Q, Sunflower Street. R is Ayrshire Street. S is Finley Street. T is Halliday Street. U is Colassa Drive, again, existing road continuation from the other subdivision. V is Sunflower Street, again, W Sunflower Street. X is Wismer Way. Y is MacArthur Avenue, again, in the 15th line to be Montgomery Road. 15th line would be a new street, by the way, coming off, going southward off of the 17th tollgate road.
Okay, seconded by Counselor Tate. Now I want to make sure council's aware there are some changes on what's printed here in front of us. So does council need any? Yes, Counselor Leatherborough.
Through your worship to Counselor Shattenberg, do we get a bit of a history lesson as to why you've, okay, perfect, thanks.
Counselor Shattenberg, go ahead.
Yeah, I know the clerk has a copy of this list. I don't know if she can email it to the councilors that didn't get the full list as was circulated and discussed earlier today. Including, of course, Wismer Way, which Counselor Tate, I'm sure will be able to discuss. But the one street, Finley, would be named after our former member of parliament, John Finley, who served many terms that up until 2004, he was a liberal. So it's sort of the historic person that way. He passed away in October of 2010. So another reason to name it after him is he has passed away. One being Bruce Halliday, who passed away in 2011. He was in the House of Commons starting in 1974. So he was an MP, a conservative MP. Also a chair of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Rights and the State of Disabled Persons is what the committee was called at that point in time that Bruce Halliday was in. Another name would be Betty MacArthur. She passed away at the age of 70 back in 1994. So just to clarify again, that this is the person that's no longer with us. She was a very well-known local artist, had a very well-known and very well-regarded book called Fine Lines Around Woodstock, which was a lot of drawings of historic homes around the city of Woodstock. And some of the other names that are come up are both to do with the dairy industry, of course, and wildflowers. And that was all part of sort of a compilation of new street names as possibilities for themes in neighborhoods that was created last term by council of last term, but through a lot of work done by Karen Houston, the museum curator, to be able to do some research and study on some of the names to be included as future street names, whether they be former mayors or former members of parliament, but also maybe some themes too. So Montgomery Road, for example, is named after Lucy Maud Montgomery, the Canadian author of Anne of Green Gables.
May I make a suggestion, Counselor Shattenberg? If you've got a copy of all the changes, would you mind sending those over to council to make sure you do have it? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, I just want to give everybody a second to go over that to see if there's any questions. Counselor Tate?
Yeah, I'll just speak to the Wismer because that was mine. The Wismer family, I think, approached me probably 4 years ago. And I had a 4-page information page on it. They are a long time, over 70 years in Woodstock, and have operated a very large number of businesses in town and a lot of volunteer work in the city. And we haven't had an opportunity like this until now to be able to do a large number of street naming, so it was perfect timing. I did not let Councillor Wismer Van Meer know until she came tonight because I didn't want to have a conflict. But I did let her family know because they've been waiting for this for quite a while. And I think it's important sometimes that we do these naming before the family has passed away. I mean, I'm sure John Finley's family will be thrilled that we've named a street after him, but sometimes it's nice when they're still around that we're doing this. So thank you to Counselor Schadenberg with coming up with the other names. I think the Poole family will be very happy to hear about MacArthur Street, and Bruce Halliday's widow would be very happy to hear too.
Counselor Schadenberg.
I guess I just wanted to add, in talking to the city engineering office today and Filippo D'Amelio, that he was suggesting that the actual developer really wanted Street A to be Meadows Gate, which would recognize and honor the golf course that had been there as well, so.
Counselor Lauder.
Thank you. I just want to thank Counselor Schadenberg for going through this today. I think spent quite a bit of time today looking back on the history and coming up with these changes. We had a few discussions about it late last night, I think it was. And so I just want to thank him for these changes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or discussion before I call the vote? Seeing none, I'll call the vote with the changes on the floor. All those in favor? None opposed. Thank you. Passed. We have new street names here in the city of Woodstock. Okay, next up we have no cultural services, parks and recreation, economic development, but we do have some clerks department. 14F1 2023 Student Civic Awards of Excellence, sorry. Looking for a motion on the floor. Counselor Wismer Van Meer.
Moved by myself that Woodstock City Council confirm the selection of Allison Haringa, Woodstock Collegiate Institute, Raquel Hunter, College Avenue Secondary School, Bridget Mays, Huron Park Secondary School, Aislinn Rooney, Ecole Secondaire Catholique Notre Dame, and Abla Sunil, St. Mary's High School as the winners of the 2023 Student Civic Awards of Excellence.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Counselor Lauder. Discussion. Counselor Wismer Van Meer.
Just kind of a comment. I did mention this before when we were passing the budget, but I'm really happy to see that we're able to recognize all of the high schools here in Woodstock now. I think that this is a great way to recognize the great work that's being done by young people in our schools. And I'm sure there was a long list of very eligible and deserving names. But congratulations to these individuals. And I hope that I got everybody's names pronounced properly, but congratulations and keep up the amazing work because you make Woodstock proud with what you do.
Thank you. Congratulations to those students as well. Yeah. Any other discussion? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Carried. None opposed. Congratulations again. That's very hard, and I'm really proud of this council too, recognizing that over the years we've had a tough time deciding ourselves on picking only one or two. Now with the decision of council going with five well-deserving students. And I might add, some of them were informed they're up for tonight and they were very excited. So 14F2, 2023 to 2027 multi-year municipal accessibility plan. Looking for a motion? Counselor Leatherborough.
Moved by myself that Woodstock City Council approve the 2023 through to 2027 multi-year municipal accessibility plan.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Counselor Wismer Van Meer. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. Nothing from the chief CAO's office, human resources. Now fire services. We do have 14I1 sole source approval for live fire stair tower. Looking for motion on the floor. Counselor Schadenberg.
Motion that Woodstock City Council approve sole sourcing of capital project number 11265, live fire stair tower, 5th floor to Baird Machines Incorporated of Woodstock.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder on the motion. Counselor Tate. I will. Counselor Schattenberg, go ahead.
Fire Chief Jeff Slager's in the room, so we can certainly let him to describe how this is going to improve the training center the fire hall currently has.
Thank you very much, your worship, through to Councillor Schattenberg. Also, I'll respect the fact that council had a long meeting tonight, so I'll keep it short. As we indicated, we came to capital budgets for this year, requesting the extension of the stair tower for us to utilize the 3rd and 4th floor of our live fire facility. As we detail within the background, Baird Machines Inc. here in Woodstock has worked with the supplier of the facility in the past to do any of the work or minor repairs and additions that were needed there. So they're familiar with it. We're very pleased with the work that they had. And that's why we are requesting the approval to go forward with them for the construction and installation of the stairs.
Thank you, Chief. Counselor Wheaton.
Yeah, I had a question through you. Is there the opportunity for other neighboring fire departments to access a facility like this for their own training?
Your worship, through to Councillor Wheaton. Yes, we do make it available. There has been some other developments within some of the townships that may alter that. We do know that the township of Norwich had done some fundraising and they've established their own training facility. And during the course of some of the repairs that we needed, we were a bit delayed in our getting ourselves out and available. This will add some of the capabilities of the facility that others in the county don't have. So again, it kind of makes us a little bit more unique at that time.
Any other questions from the chief while we have him here in the in-house? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Last opportunity for any questions or discussion before I call the vote. Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. Thank you. Nothing from Public Works or IT tonight. We do have a special committee advisory task force report from the Woodstock Rec Advisory Committee. 15A, looking for motion. Counselor Schattenberg.
The Woodstock City Council approves Alita Kingswood and Amanda Nelson for induction at the 2023 Sports Wall of Fame ceremony in the category of special recognition.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder on that. Counselor Lauder. Discussion. Counselor Schattenberg.
Just want to point out to everybody that the full report on the council agenda for tonight includes the 5 previous inductees that have yet to be inducted because of COVID. We want to do it sort of a live presentation in person, so that'll be done in September. But the Recreation Advisory Committee did take a look at the sporting accomplishments of some of the people in the area, and we've came up with these 2 women to be inducted as well under special recognition category, which means they deserve to be recognized now and not wait 5 or 6 or 7 years to be inducted. One being Amanda Nelson is interesting because I talked to her on the telephone to give her the news, and she's in Germany right now competing at another ultra marathon race. They call it the backyard running. So it's kind of a cross country race where they really do run for distance. So she could be running this X number of kilometers over 2 or 3 days as far as her running goes, not just a 42-kilometer marathon. And Alita Kingswood certainly got a lot of press herself. She's 91 years old. And I talked to her on the phone about the world record she was setting in her age bracket for basically what's a rowing machine as far as the distance she was able to travel at over 3,000, what her time was for 3,000 meters on a rowing machine. So it was nice to talk to her on the phone as well. And they're both looking forward to being inducted and being recognized by the city of Woodstock.
Thank you. Looking for, did I have a seconder on that? I'm sorry, I did, didn't I? My apologies. Any other discussion? Okay, I'd just like to say congratulations to them. I was reading some of Amanda Nelson's accomplishments, especially 375 kilometers over 3 days. Like just blows my mind of running. I just cannot fathom that. I don't drive that much in a week. So congratulations to both of them, well deserving, and of course all the other recipients that we've been acknowledging this time, and apologize for the wait, but we're excited to get to have the Sports Wall of Fame up and running soon. Looking for a motion, or sorry, looking for vote. All those in favor? None opposed. My apologies. That is carried. No notice of motion or new business that I'm aware of. Draft bylaws, Counselor Wheaton.
Thank you, your worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Schadenberg that the following bylaws be given a first and second reading. 9597-23, a bylaw to amend the City of Woodstock Municipal Code 94, clerk temporary acting. 9598-23, a bylaw to govern and regulate the finances for the City of Woodstock for the fiscal year end December 31st, 2023, to provide for the adoption of tax rates and to further provide for penalty and interest in default of payment thereof for 2023. 9599-23, a bylaw to approve the estimates for the Board of Management for the business improvement area for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2023. 9600-23, a bylaw to amend the City of Woodstock Municipal Code, Chapter 153, Property Standards Officers Appointments. 9601-23, a bylaw to amend City of Woodstock Municipal Code, Chapter 134, Officials Appointments. And 9602-23, a bylaw to amend the City of Woodstock Municipal Code, Chapter 127, Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Carried. Counselor Wheaton.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wisber Van Meer that the following bylaws be given a third and final reading. 9597-23 through to 9602-23.
Inclusive. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Carried. And tonight, we will start with Counselor Wheaton. Since you haven't talked enough yet.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm glad that you started with me because I really didn't have a long list of items prepared and figured if I was last, they'd all be taken, which I feel your pain. Yes, earlier tonight we had the I'm gonna find it. The sign request. Where is it? Where did I put it? It is coming up on. Where did I put it? Thank you. The AmbiCare for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion event on May 27th, which is coming up next weekend, I believe. So I always appreciate when organizations can get out and support equity, diversity, and inclusion. This will be a first time for me attending an event like this, and I'm very much looking forward to being a part of it. So encourage others to come out, a community barbecue, fundraiser for local charity, and the opportunity to support equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Thank you. Counselor Leatherborough.
Okay, I have two pieces. So one, Monday, June 19th, I will say this again at the next council meeting, but there will be a screening of The Smallest Steps documentary, which is a Canadian film. The director, Nicole, is coming to Woodstock. Early Bird Coffee, which is my business, Zonta, Dart, Real Treats have put this event on. So you can get tickets through the Dart website. For students, it is free. For everyone else, it is $10 admission. But The Smallest Steps documentary is a story of how women find their voice, both as individuals and as a collective movement, through an intergenerational glimpse of the courage and stamina required to be an anti-violent activist. This story teaches us that even the smallest steps to do what is right can lead to big change. So please join us. And the second is my family's with the Ingersoll Nurse Practitioner-led clinic. They are accepting applications starting May 1st through to May 31st. You can find their application online. You may mail it in or drop off your application to the white locked drop box outside of the clinic door. My family and I applied the first time a couple of years ago and we were denied because our family doctor was in Guelph. So they do prioritize people that do not have a doctor. However, if you can get in and write one great application, they have amazing, exceptional care. So, and have a great long weekend.
Thank you. Counselor Lauder.
Thank you. I have an announcement from the Art Gallery. Looking for something to spark the interest of those young artists in your family this summer. The Woodstock Art Gallery is offering a whole suite of creative workshops for children age 4 to 12. Arts education professionals will guide young makers through innovative projects and lessons that will cultivate creativity, self-expression, and collaboration. Spaces are limited, so please register early. All details can be found on the Woodstock Art Gallery's website. So lots of things there for children. And I'm looking forward to the parade on Monday, and I'm going to be in the yellow Mustang. And I said, if I ever wanted to come convertible, that's what I wanted. So that's what I'm going to get to ride in. Thank you.
Counselor Shanberg.
Yeah, first of all, I want to talk about Christmas. I'm being serious. The tour of homes from the museum that's recognizing their 75th birthday this year, the Woodstock Museum. Curator Karen Houston is organizing with the Museum Advisory Committee and the Oxford Historical Society a tour of homes that's being planned for November 25th. So it won't be a Christmas tour of homes until obviously closer to Christmas. But what we're looking for at this point in time is any houses that might be interested in participating in the event. And if they want to, they'd like, say, decorating the house early on for Christmas and they really love the season, to be able to contact Karen Houston at the museum to do so. Coming up on June the 11th is the Woodstock Triathlon Club's Kids Do. So it's not a triathlon, it's two sports. It's running and cycling. For example, the 12 to 13 age group will run 2 kilometers, bicycle for 7 kilometers, and then run for 2 more kilometers in the event. So there'll be kids as young as 3 years old, though, competing at the Southside Park that day. Woodstock Triathlon Club.ca is their website. One more thing I want to mention, just a reminder, the deadline is tomorrow, May 19th, to participate in the strategic planning priorities. Let's Talk Woodstock.ca is the website, Let's Talk Woodstock.ca. And it's a survey on city facilities, so ranging everything from sports and recreation to cultural facilities in the city of Woodstock as we continue to update our strategic planning priorities.
Thank you. Counselor Wismer Van Meer.
Counselor Schadenberg did steal one of mine for the Let's Talk Woodstock. So tomorrow is the one for the facilities, where May 22nd is the one about the strategic realignment. So you do have a couple more days to get that survey in from the Let's Talk Woodstock. And I would be disappointing, Counselor Schadenberg, if I didn't mention that Theater Woodstock does have another production on the deck. Starting next Friday, they will have the stages presentation. So this is the second stages. These are all the young people. So they are grade 7 through to grade 12. And they're going to be doing You're in Town. I know it sounds interesting, and it is a very interesting production. They have a live band that accompanies them as well. They put a lot of work into this production. So if you have an opportunity, it does run for a couple of weeks starting next Friday with a matinee on that Sunday as well. And also, I can't go without mentioning that K2K Productions just wrapped up Newsies Junior. I had a chance to go see that last weekend, and it was a phenomenal production. They have them at Movement Church, and the set design absolutely blew me away. I couldn't believe what they had put together for that production. So kudos to every single person that was involved in that, because to see something like that, a production of that level with that kind of set design in Woodstock was really impressive. So congratulations to all of them, and especially the young folks that do participate in that. It's always great to see, and have a wonderful long weekend. My plan is to be in the parade on electric scooters. So if I fall down, please don't laugh too hard. I will be wearing my helmet.
Thank you. Counselor Tate.
Yeah, just a couple issues. The first one, this is for the mayor, since the Leafs are now out of the playoffs. The Vegas Knights has the largest number of Canadians on the team. And I'm not sure if you know, but Kevin Bruder's daughter lives with one of them. So there's a Woodstock connection, so you can cheer for the Vegas Knights. And on a more
Appreciate that. Thank you. I did not know that.
Yes.
Even though I know the Bruder family.
Yeah. So on a more serious note, we thought we had this all done and put away with last year at county, and we do not. So just for everybody's information, the county is trying to take our water again. Ours in Tilsonburg, it's been a terrible battle. I'd like to thank the mayor. He did a fantastic job at county council between our mayor and Councillor Gilvasi and myself. We fought for it. One of the reasons I do believe that the mayor ran was the issue of the water, and it was the reason it was such a big issue is the $30 million that our ratepayers have paid into reserves that they want to take. And then of course, all our jobs of our workers. So the mayor was quite involved in it the last time, even though you weren't on county council, Councillor Lauder was. And I also want to thank Councillor Lauder and Councillor Schallenberg to come to the meeting the other day, but I think everybody needs to be aware what's going on. The public needs to be aware again. We need to fight for this because as far as I'm concerned, the council at the county didn't know what they were voting on. They had no information. They didn't have all the reports that we were privy to last time. They were just going to go ahead and vote and give our water away and all our jobs. So I just want to make sure that everybody you talk to, please let them know what's going on, and we need to fight for this. We need to fight for our workers, our staff. They have been through a lot and we thought we had it done, but they surprised us. So I just want to thank the mayor. He was fantastic at that job, at the meeting, and it's been tough. And have a nice long weekend.
Thank you for that. Yes, the water agreement, I'm excited for hopefully to come into place. We finally do have an agreement, and I would like to say thank you to county council in general, everyone for agreeing to allow that to happen before a final vote comes on this. I think it's paramount that the town of Tillsonburg and the city of Woodstock and Oxford County have some kind of agreement in place with that makes sense for not only our staff, but for the residents, most importantly, because as it sits, I'm not sure that is the primary concern here. So we will continue. So thank you, Councillor Tate, for those comments. And it is a big reason why I ran for mayor, because of that, actually. Before I go on to mention a couple of things, I've been asked a fair bit about Lions Pool, and I can't let him sit here without asking if Mr. Jolicoeur, the supervisor of aquatics and rec programs, would kindly give us an update on Lions Pool, because every year we go through this.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we had difficulties initially finding contractors that would either meet our timelines or would do the work. They would only look at doing full liner replacement. So we met with a contractor today that can now meet our timelines and will do the repair, thankfully. So I don't have pricing yet. That's coming tomorrow. So maybe too soon on the woo. Yeah, so we are looking at about a quarter to a third of the liner that needs to be repaired. It's a large chunk. So we predicted some of this. We have 10,000 in capital. I'm expecting it'll be higher, and we'll be coming back for, I suppose, an ask.
Fair enough. Thank you for being here and that lovely update. But again, we've been talking about it every single year. We'll keep it going, and for those residents at home, we'll certainly do everything we can to open it as soon as possible. So yeah, most of the things have been mentioned. A couple on my list that weren't is next Saturday is a fairly busy day here in the city. Of course, the Ambicare for Diversity was mentioned, but we also have the IG Walk for Alzheimer's in the morning that I'll be attending, as well as the Woodstock Truck Show is that day as well. So busy day in Woodstock, a lot of events, basically from morning till evening, with the Woodstock Truck Show actually having some bands at the fairgrounds. So be excited, and I'll be there. And of course, 10 a.m. on Monday, we have the Victoria Day Parade. I will be in it as well. I believe most of us will be in the parade, and look forward to seeing everybody along the parade route. And just a reminder, this is the one that ends at Southside Park every year. So hopefully see everybody then. And with that, I'll ask for an adjournment. Councillor Wheaton, second by Councillor Wismer Van Meer. All those in motion? Wow, those arms went up pretty quick. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.